Hi, it's Nikki. Welcome back to my channel. You just caught me kind of flipping through one of my books that I read. Today's video is my March-April wrap-up because I didn't do one for March, so we're just smooshing the months together. I read 6 books during the months of March and April, which may not seem a whole lot, but let me tell you, I'm incredibly proud of the fact that I was able to get in 6 books during the 2-month time frame. Still behind on my Goodreads goal, but I still have like 7 months to go, so no big deal. The first book that I read in the month of March is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinbrough. This, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, already qualifies as the worst book that I will read in 2019. And like I said, I read this in March. Very brief synopsis. This is a multi-point of view, also multi-timeline psychological thriller. This was a blind buy on Amazon. And by the way, when I start talking plot points, I'm going to have a little spoiler alert in the corner. If you do not want to be spoiled about this terrible book, then you can skip forward until the spoiler alert is no longer there. But this is a psychological thriller. It was a blind buy on Amazon. I don't typically read psychological thrillers very often. It's just never been something that I've picked up. So I thought it got really great reviews. So I thought I would give it a try. And no. This stars, the 2 point of views is Louise, a kind of frumpy, recently divorced wife. The story takes place in London. She meets a man at a bar. They start going hot and heavy when he suddenly remembers, oh, hey, I'm married, so we can't continue this. She goes into the work the next day and discovers that the man she was trying to hook up with the night before is her new boss. So already that's kind of a cliched storyline right there. She's leaving the office and just so happens to run into David's wife, Adele, who is the other point of view in this story. And throughout the book, Louise is drawn further and further into this mysterious relationship between David and Adele. She doesn't quite get their dynamic. Adele seems so fragile and David so demanding. But then inevitably, David and Louise end up having an affair anyway. And Louise just gets drawn further and further in. Part of the multi-timeline aspect of it is it starts to delve a little bit further into Adele's background. She was in an asylum for a brief time, met a guy named Rob, who she became very, very close friends with. They learned how to control their dreams, not in as much as lucid dreaming, but as a way of, and here's the kicker, fast forward now if you don't want to know the asinine plot twist of this book, astral projection. I went into this book thinking psychological thriller, like Girl on the Train, A Woman in Cabin 10, something like that, and ended up getting a fantasy book, basically. I mean, that came out of left field for me. I got finished reading it and wanted to just toss it across the room. It was just, no, I feel dumber for having read this. The next book in March is The Heir of Novron by Michael J. Sullivan. This is volume 3 of the Rhyria Revelations, so it's going to be kind of hard to talk about this book, so I'm just going to talk about what I felt about it, because it is the third in the Rhyria Revelations, Theft of Swords and Rise of Empire. Michael J. Sullivan is actually very active on the fantasy subreddit on Reddit, so it's always really nice to see an author that you really like active with the community. But this, it's actually 6 books in 3. The Theft of Swords starts out, we meet our 2 main characters, Hadrian Blackwater and Royce Melbourne. One's an assassin, one is a thief/mercenary. This is a basic heist book. Then we start getting into more political intrigue in this book. And then the third book, The Heir of Novron, this is the end of the series, and it ends the political intrigue. Novron is their god, and there's a prophecy that the heir of Novron is slated to return and rule the lands and bring peace to all. And finding out who the actual heir of Novron was a bit of a shock, because I didn't really see it coming. This was a very satisfying conclusion to this series. In fact, I actually picked up the first book of the Rhaeria Chronicles, which is before Theft of Swords and talks about how Hadrian and Royce actually got together. So ended up giving this one, I think 3.5 or maybe 4 stars out of 5. So very good. Nice weaving of some mythology into this book. So if you want a really good fantasy series, I highly recommend checking these out. The third book I read in March was Where Loyalties Lie by Rob J. Hayes. Unfortunately, this is probably number 2 on my worst books I've read so far this year. I hated the fact that I had 2 1-star books in a month, but that's the luck of the draw. I mean, you could go for 6 months reading just fantastic book after fantastic book, or you can read dud after dud, which kind of was this case. This is a pirate book. It centers around 2 separate pirates, Drake Morass and Keelan Stillwater. Basically, the equivalent of the East India Trading Company is coming for the pirate community, and Drake wants to unite all of the pirates under his rule and kind of fight back against this East India equivalent. It sounded fantastic. I love pirate books. It sounded like this was going to be a raucous good time, and I would love this book and continue on in the series. Instead, the plot was not really all that well fleshed out. The characters were extremely flat to me, almost very stereotypical, what somebody would imagine a pirate would be. Every woman in this book is reduced down to her curves, which, I mean, I guess I can understand, I would assume, not ever having been a pirate myself, I would assume that, pirates, they think about booty and, well, booty. But it was annoying. It got annoying after like the 5th woman was, her curves were described and she didn't really have a whole lot in the way of personality. One of the side characters in this book is I guess one of the main pirates, Black Tanner, or Tanner Black. He was so much of a cliche of the evil pirate. I never really got a sense that anybody was in real danger. Plus, he had his daughter, who owns a ship under him, raped by his first mate on his ship as punishment. And that pretty much right there just kind of drew the line for me on this book. I finished it, but I have zero interest in continuing on in this series. It's just the flat characters, the misogyny, the unnecessary rape. Just, nope, not for me. On to April. The first book I read in April is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. I have read Temeraire by Naomi Novik, and while I enjoyed it, it wasn't something that I went to reach for later books in the series. So I was cautiously optimistic about this book. This is a fairy tale retelling in kind of a Russian setting. Every 10 years, the dragon comes from his castle and takes one girl from the surrounding villages back to his castle, where she is never seen again. So it is 10 years, and the dragon comes and picks the most unassuming woman in the villages, kind of a little Mary Sue at that aspect of, she's not the most beautiful girl, so of course she's going to get picked. There's also an evil wood that's encroaching upon the villages, which I thought was pretty interesting. This wood will send out agents to kidnap people. People will go too close to the woods and then kind of come back and they're changed, and they change people around them. So I thought that was really interesting. There wasn't an actual... It was just an overlarging malevolent evil about this wood. Our main character is Agnieszka, and she goes to the tower where she starts learning magic under the dragon. She's pretty terrible at it at first, but quickly learns how to harness her own powers, and in the end, basically forges her own way. They manage to, spoiler alert, they manage to defeat the wood, and she harnesses her power, and it actually ends up going back to her own village because the wood is no longer evil. The dragon is basically trying to save people from the wood, but he can only save one at a time, and that's why he chooses one girl, and that's why they no longer return to their home, because they have been released from the magic of the wood. So I gave this one 4 stars. The setting was fantastic. I thought the magic system was really well done. The characters were beautiful. So yeah, good book. The next book I read in April is The Affinity Bridge by George Mann. This has been on my shelf for a really long time, but I know there are others in this series, so I wanted to go ahead and give it a chance because those keep showing up on my recommended on Amazon. This is a steampunk alternate Victorian England, which I adore. I will read just about any book in that setting. I love alternate Victorian England books. This follows our 2 main characters, Sir Maurice Newberry and Veronica Hobbs, his assistant. Newberry is a detective working under Queen Victoria and is charged to find the reason why an airship crashed, also killing one of Queen Victoria's cousins. On that crash, there is automaton work, there's intrigue, there is creepy London fog atmosphere. So I think that I gave this one 3.5 stars, but there's a little bit of a twist at the end. I'm not going to spoil that twist because I don't hate this book. So yeah, I will definitely be continuing on in the series of Newberry and Hobbs. And the last book I read for April is Heroine Complex. This is actually funny. I generally tend to go more towards the grimdark, the, post-apocalyptic, serious work. I was debating what book I wanted to pick up next, and my husband said, "You should pick up something light and whimsical." And I said, "I don't know if I have anything light and whimsical." So I looked over my shelves and saw this one and thought, aha, this seems like it could be pretty fun. So 8 years ago, a portal opened up in San Francisco and demons were unleashed. In the fight, a lot of people gained superpowers. And this isn't like people gained like Captain America level superpowers. This is like they gained telepathy, but they can only move something like a couple of inches. It's not even enough to do anything about. But this stars our 2 main characters, Aveda Jupiter and Evie Tanaka. They are childhood friends. Aveda Jupiter is her assumed name. It's actually Annie Chang is her real name. Aveda Jupiter decided to basically become a superhero, even though she didn't really have any decent superpowers, but she trains really hard to defeat demons because these portals will pop up just randomly throughout the city, and Aveda Jupiter is there to save the day. Evie Tanaka is her assistant. very put upon assistant because Avada Jupiter is very spoiled and very loud and very obnoxious. And I was pretty damn close to giving this book like 2.5 stars because of I was tired of the characters at the very beginning. I usually give a book 100 pages, and if it hasn't caught me during that time, life's too short. I'm gonna put it aside. But I decided to keep going, and the characters grew on me. It ends up that there is a bigger threat than anybody ever imagined. So Evie and Avada Jupiter have to come together with the rest of their Scooby Gang to combine powers, basically, to defeat the dark evil. This was actually a very fun book. I'm glad that I stuck with it. There is some character growth throughout the book. So characters were obnoxious at the beginning, but they grew on me and ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And there are 3 books in this series, I believe. So I am going to keep on going with this. Oh, one really fun part about this book is when the demons come through, they will imprint on whatever the nearest thing to the portal they see. So our opening scene is Avada Jupiter fighting demonic cupcakes in a bakery. So that, outside of the characters, that really sold me on the plot. So yep, I'll continue reading on this one. So that was it. A couple of duds, some really good ones. I'm currently rereading Good Omens, getting prepared for the Amazon show, which is coming out sometime this month, I believe. I did do a mini book haul, so I will be filming that soon. So you can see the great books that I just recently got, and hopefully back at the end of May to talk about the books that I've read this month. So thanks for watching, and read well.